Catherine Connolly,
please. And I welcome the opportunity to take part in the debate. And I wish I could say that you have embraced the challenge to give a transformative budget, but I'm afraid you failed miserably. Yes, let me say that there are good things in the budget, and I welcome those. And as my time is limited, I won't itemise them, but I welcome the contribution to T.G. Cahir, to Udaros na Gaeltachta. I welcome the changes in relation to disability, small though they are, and there are many others that I welcome. But what's missing is an overall recognition that we have one last opportunity to bring transformative change because of the challenge of climate change and because of COVID. And the language that has been used throughout COVID is, we will never go back. We have learned we can never go back to where we are. And equally, we declared a climate emergency and a biodiversity on the 9th of May last year, crisis. And you were forced into doing that, of course. You were forced into doing it by opposition, not yourself personally, but the government at the time, to declare an emergency and move forward. And I look at the two speeches today, and I did my best in the time that I had to look. I'll go back on them tomorrow. And really, it says it all when in a speech of a few pages, a good few pages, you have less than a page from Minister Donoghue on climate change, and Mr McGrath went better and had a page and a half. Rather than both speeches coming from a recognition of climate change and that from now on things have to be different, because there is no going back. This is our last opportunity. So I look then to see what have we done. And Minister Donoghue tells us, my department is also publishing an analysis of the budget 2021, which provides clear evidence of its progressive nature and how it protects the most vulnerable in society. There's something wrong with this. He is also publishing, so that hasn't been published yet, and it provides clear evidence of its progressive nature. I don't know. We haven't seen it. We haven't been given that, Minister. It would have been wonderful to have that report so we could analyse its progressive nature, because I failed to see it. You see, when I go through my notes, and particularly when I come from a city where people are waiting more than 15 years on a housing waiting list and have never been offered a house. And I say that to illustrate the extent of the housing crisis in Galway City for a very long time. And when we look at the speech from I call him the Minister of Sihir Breher, the Minister of the Passive Tense, Deputy Michael McGrath. For years now, supply has failed to keep pace with demand. Rising rents and house prices have pushed ownership out of the reach of many. And I call that the Sihir Breher. He had nothing to do with that. Fianna Fáil had nothing to do with that. Fine Gael had nothing to do with it. And now the Green Party have nothing to do with it. Rents just rise like that, and house prices just go up. And the vast majority of people are forced out of the housing net, which have nothing to do with that. Now, I would say here in the strongest possible terms that government after government has led to this housing crisis with their policy. Labour were also part of that with Fine Gael when they brought in the Housing Act. Now, if they realise that was a mistake, I'd love to hear it. But they brought in the housing assistance payment, and that has been the single most important determinant of rents rising and a housing crisis in this country. And between RHAP and RAS and long-term leasing, we're spending over $1 billion per year directly into the pockets of the landlords. Now, I'm on record as saying we need landlords. I'm not anti-landlords. We need landlords in the market, but we need the government as the main player. We need them Ilora and Éine in the middle of the fair, and they have never done that. And today we see that language being used, but when you actually look at the language and say a commitment to social housing, and there seems to be a little divergence, despite the fact that they're happily married now, Minister Donoghue and Minister McGrath. There is a little divergence in relation to social housing, and Minister McGrath seems more determined to build social housing. And he talks about 500 million for social housing, and he's going to build over 5,000. It's not possible. So there's a sleight of hand all the time when we talk about social housing, and it seems that benefited in the private market under the various schemes is what social housing is now. Now, I would ask if we've learned anything from COVID, it's to be honest and direct with people, not to be given double messages like the Taoiseach did on Claire Byrne, and he goes on and he undermines NEFID, and the very next day he goes to the Parliamentary Party and he says it looks like a full close down will be necessary. Now, we could cite many examples of that. And what I'm appealing to you, Minister, as a new Minister, just to learn to speak directly, clearly and honestly to the people. So if you're going to put all your resources into the private market, say that, but stop pretending with us. And so we look at mental health, and you talk about an extra 28 million, but you don't tell us that for years it has been the poor relation in relation to health. You don't tell us where's the independent monitoring body that you promised to set up, because nobody has ever trusted any of us politicians, and rightly so, when it comes to mental health. So that's why there was an independent monitoring system that's set for 2 periods. You promised to set it up again, no mention anywhere of that. And then you come to disability. And earlier this year, I had a letter, as all TDs did. In my case, it was Ability West, where the training allowance was taken from people at training centres. A miserly allowance in terms of what I earn. And that was taken. It would have been a measure of your bona fides to reinstate that allowance, which meant so much to people attending those training centres and giving them a measure of independence. And then we go down the line and we look and we see in relation to disability carers. Again, I live in a city where I know the numbers are very large in relation to receiving no respite. So people are struggling with husbands with dementia, with children with disability, absolutely no respite. The latest letter from Merlin Park, no respite has been provided since March of this year. And you give an increase in a carer support grant of €150 per year. You don't think about looking at the majority of Ireland's carers who are keeping the country going. Without them, we couldn't have an economy. And most of them don't qualify for anything at all. You don't look at a disability payment, which is very, very little. €20 a week, I think, is what they've asked for. You talk about 5 million additional home care hours. It's hard to deal in millions, although we're getting used to that now with the monopoly money. But let me translate that. Somebody with a husband with senile dementia is trying to survive on 10 home care hours a week. I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed with my salary that somebody like that, and I'm going home to tell them, look, there'll be 5 million additional, but I'm not sure where you'll fit into that equation. When we look at domestic violence, I tried in vain to see one mention of domestic violence. And I can't, Minister. Could you explain that to me? Because many reporters over the last few days have said it's easy for the opposition to put forward budgets with no costing. And my logic is, what is the cost of not doing it? And so we know with domestic violence, the direct cost to the economy is €2.5 billion per year. And yet I can't find any reference to this new government transforming actions dealing with domestic violence. So Ireland is obliged to have 472 places in refuges in place. We have 141. There's an epidemic of domestic violence. The guards have been brilliant in this regard, and the policing authority has paid tribute to them, but they only can do so much. So in a truly transformative budget, we would not divide the people up. We wouldn't be putting a carbon tax in as the main thing for climate change. We would be putting climate change underpinning all our actions and bringing people together and not dividing the rural areas from the city. I'm over time and the Ciancórla has been patient with me, so I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Connolly.